Okay, for the second time. This is the Shooters Only Paintball podcast hosted by Jordan Hernandez. This is episode number 2. My guest today is Alan Turner. I'm very excited to talk to this gentleman because I am probably considered a newbie in the sport.
Total
now.
noob.
Very new. I look probably 17 years old with my hat backwards, but I wanted to really be able to touch base on the history of paintball and kind of your contributions and your accomplishments kind of throughout your time of what I'm going to call, quote unquote, the glory days of paintball. Is that fair?
I think that is probably accurate. If you look at it from a sales standpoint and a participation standpoint, that's accurate. You really saw it peak, kind of late 2000s and then had a radical taper off.
Right.
And you've seen a bit of a resurgence, but if you look at the overall business dynamics, economics minor.
Sure.
So
if
you look at the overall kind of flow of where paintball's gone, it really was big. And when the economy crashed, a lot of my customers were construction guys, right? So I can tell, well, they were. Like, it was just tons of them. Yeah. The player base was a lot of construction guys, at least where I was up here in Davis County. And so when the real estate market crashed in 08, 09, of course, they all went away, no extra income.
Sure.
And you have field issues and stuff, I'm sure, continue with everybody. But yeah, from a player and economic standpoint, that's probably a fair statement.
I think glory days.
That's probably fair.
Before we go too far, construction worker, this is a single man.
Not always single.
But
not always single.
I'm gonna stereotype. So single guy, maybe has 1 or 2 kids, maybe not necessarily at home, maybe divorced. That's unfair. That's very unfair.
It's me.
But what he has is a lot of money because he works 50, 60 hours a week, a ton of overtime. And at that time, and this was one of my pieces I want to segue to, case prices were probably upwards of $70, $80?
I never sold it for that much.
Sure.
I mean, one of the reasons I started getting into it from a business standpoint, because I really started in the late 90s, and people that were selling at that time, you saw those kind of 60, 70 case prices. Well, I've done multiple businesses. I'm an entrepreneurial guy. It's what I do today. So it was pretty easy for me to go, hey, I can quickly get wholesale set up and et cetera. So when I had my retail stores, we had stuff. I would always bring in inexpensive stuff for people. It's one reason we grew. So even at retail, I was selling case prices at sub $40. Mm-hmm. But then you had premium paints and all that kind of stuff upwards of 70.
Okay.
That's true. But there was always a variety.
Right.
Of kind of paint grade. So we kind of specialize in that middle grade. The most stuff I sold was probably about $45 a case at retail.
Sure.
Then you could promo it, down to around $40. That was kind of a common place, but there was more places to play. That's the big issue. There was all kinds of places to play.
Gotcha.
A lot of the fields were up along the highway. Those you remember the old 84 field, if you're up in Weber, Davis County. So I don't know how many thousands of rounds of paint people used to shoot, stuff that I sold and, Peg Leg and Ogden used to sell. And there's another guy up there named D-Ray I haven't seen in years. But anyway, there's a few of us that sold and that's where it went. And there was a field in Sunset, I live in Layton, currently is where we're at. So
nice, yes.
It wasn't.
I didn't preface that.
Yeah, it's all good. So it's not too far down the road here, just basically West Syracuse, West Point area. Yeah. The Splat Paintball, Rod, and the guys down there. So there was places to go and play, lots of them.
Look at that. So that's so interesting to me. So Utah Paintball, as it sits right now, in terms of recreational play and the kind of competitive player that still wants to remain in the woods or scenario type player, we find ourselves at these kind of abandoned places, and really only northbound you have the Marriott Field in Ogden that still remains, and I don't know if you kind of even saw that being played. I don't know if that was a thing at the time.
It was.
And then
that's a 12th Street one, right?
12th Street, yeah.
It's always been there. I actually talked to the property owners across the street from that.
Yeah.
I've even tried to buy property in there.
Nice.
Yeah, and
it's a
nobody
good
would
area.
Sell.
Yeah, it's a decent area for paintball. I think we're fortunate to have that field today in terms of recreation play.
It's the only place to go now.
Yeah, exactly.
There used to be all kinds of them.
Right.
But homes, have really taken over in the last, what are we talking about, 12 years or so, 10 years. And, even where we live here, what we're in today was a field a year ago. So there's that.
And that's kind of what I've seen in terms of roadblock. I know my progression is always wanting to bring some sort of paintball to the major metro area in a good, awesome way. I've always told my wife, who would probably be in it with the venture of mine, I would need Top Golf money to do it right. Like, I think anyone says that, right? Because to roll something out awesome and exclusive and cool, and to do it the right way, you'd almost need that quote unquote Top Golf money, $1 million piece. But you could also start small, and that's my segue. And I've started small in terms of Red Creek Paintball.
Sure.
But I thought of that because in the valley, real estate is
too
booming.
expensive.
Yeah,
It's too
and
expensive.
I'm struggling with the aspect of, is a farmer going to let me use their land when they could be approached in the next 5 to 10 years of what I would lease it for, and say, here's $10 million, here's this massive amounts of money.
No, so I've been through that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Jason Orbis.
I do. I know the name.
Okay, so he ran
Haven't said
Spec Ops. Very, very wealthy guy.
Oh yes, he's going to eventually be on the podcast.
Yeah, so cool, and he's a cool dude to talk to too. Just interesting cat. So good dude. But I mean, he used to run off his house up in East Bountiful, literally above the golf course, right, that he owned. But even then, you ran into trouble with the city zoning and all that.
Correct.
So so I've done a lot of work in trying to get and build fields. I've actually helped with a couple over the years, and we always run into issues with cities, and then once you get built out, you got neighbors, right? And eventually that's what drove us off of the Logan property where we used to run Scenario. It wasn't the owners or even the money. It was the fact that the neighbors eventually put pressure on him to not let us in there, even though it was once a year for 2 days, big deal.
That's crazy. No, and I know we're kind of all over the place and we're not really following a format. We're obviously having a conversation. That's probably what you're used to as a viewer here. But one thing that Logan field rings home to a lot of Utah paintball players as aliens in the Rockies, right?
Yep.
So tell me a little bit.
We did a couple other events up there, but that was the big one. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that series, how it came about, how it progressed from, owning a store to moving into this. I don't know if you owned a store prior to that or
store came
what was
later.
The case. Tell me how that kind of came about.
So I personally am a bit of a researcher, and so I had interest in paintball even before I had money. Now, this goes back to about 94. So again, early days of paintball. Yeah. There were people, and I still have friends that were playing in those days, right? I mean, so you want to talk to, and I'm sure you'll talk to some of the OG people. We've talked about some of them.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily OG in that regard, right? I came around in the late 90s, so that's a little later, but not only a couple years.
What would I be considered if I was born in 93?
You?
A thought, a figment in someone's imagination?
I don't even know, dude. I don't know. Yeah, blinking daddy's eye before he met mommy. I don't know what you call that. A hope, a wish, a desire.
A desire.
So I had actually studied quite a bit. And at that time, there was a fairly large paintball website called the World and Regional Paintball Information Guide, otherwise known as Warpig. Okay.
Nice.
Those of you that are OG will remember this site.
Hopefully we can even find a screenshot of that to display.
You'll have to go look in the time capsule. It's been gone for a long time, but they had a lot of information about paintball. And, I would get original magazines, and this was again pre-Facebook and social media and the kind of things that you all are used to nowadays. So to find and connect with people was really hard. And so you did it on bulletin board forums, if you could.
Yeah.
And you did it on places like Warpig, which was a big bulletin board system and news and so on. Anyway, so I eventually found information on there in 98 or 97 because we just been playing out as friends. What would be called rec ball, woods ball today, strictly. And I didn't know there was anything else, literally no idea. I mean, there was this theoretical pro level, but really it was just rec ball stuff. Anyway, I came across a game. I found a game that was actually down south of Phoenix by a company called Black Cat Productions. They were a competitor of Viper, Carrie Viper Rosenblatt, who's still producing today, and Bud Orr, right? Because again, war games and all that, if you don't know, came from the scenario world. And so my first exposure to what would be called a scenario was down there. So it was in 99. My buddy Kyle and I went down south of Phoenix. I drove. Long drive to Phoenix, by the way. I learned that the hard way.
That is a long drive.
Well, and this was south of Phoenix.
Dang.
And so, but we went down there, I think in like February or something, and went and played. And so we saw how it was run. And the guy that was generaling during the night was terribly disorganized and annoyed the crap out of me. So I said, dude, just step out of the tent. Let me take this. Yeah. So I organized and ran the game basically all night long. Just because I have an organized engineering mind, and he annoyed me. And, we made up some points and stabilized some stuff, and I think I got killed somewhere in there. But by daytime, he wanted it back, so, it's fine. I went back to just being a player. But what I learned from that was I enjoyed scenarios, and a lot of people how they're done could be done a million ways. And so I had also been to an Idaho, just at what they call a big game. And I don't think it runs today. It was actually south of Idaho Falls. And at the time, that was about the only thing there was. So anyway, started talking to some friends, found a field. And in 99, up a canyon just above, actually up Providence Canyon, we ran our first event based on what we'd learned not to do. by playing. In some ways, right? I said, look, I like this, I didn't like this. So we ran our first game. We had full actors, actually, because I was involved with some live action role play, cosplay guys.
Nice.
So they actually came in complete aliens costumes.
See, and I think that's such a huge X factor because I think when you are the ringleader, it's the circus guy. There's a name for it. You know the name? It forgets me.
From Paintball, it's just the producer, but
exactly. So from the producer standpoint, there's all the X's and O's, all the different things that go on that day. But one of the things that I think was so interesting, I really think captivated a lot of these memories for these people that are still mentioning you in the Facebook forums today. That is,
thanks by the way, Jason.
That is the theme games and the immersiveness of utilizing some of these actors. So tell me a little bit about their role. Are they even picking up a gun, or are they just NPC players? Are they people on the outskirts?
So I come from a big role-playing background, right? Before paintball, that was, and still is my hobby, basically D&D and related tabletop games. So I understood the concept of an NPC, right, and how to use it. And so in many ways, those of you that are familiar with that terminology, that is what we always had, some NPC characters. Now, the scenario I went to kind of had some, but they didn't make sense. They were too complicated. It just didn't work. So what I realized is to add to that immersive level is, people want to play, and that's cool, but to have some other unpredictable element. So we evolved that and tested different things over about the 10 or 12 years roughly that we ran it. We were out 1 year, but somewhere in that neighborhood. I think there was 11 or 12 games that we ran in total. And so we would experiment with different, methods.
Nice.
At first, no guns. They were just aliens. They were supposed to come swipe at you just like out of the movie. And one of the guys was like the 6'5" guy with like these long arms. And so, people would shoot at him and he was like, and he would die. And, I wish I had video. Like, I literally wish I had video. He was a crazy dude. And he made all the armor. In fact, he makes armor for cosplay stuff to this day. Like,
really?
Legit leather armor, the whole bit. Yeah.
Awesome.
So interesting dude. So not a paintball player at all.
Sure.
He was just a role-playing guy. Said, hey, will you come do this? He's like, yeah. But I think he got shot so much, like they wouldn't come back.
I would imagine that, right? Anyone outside of our sport is like, this is aggressive, this is crazy, this is scary.
Well, I think he was okay with that. Well, because they're doing combat, like they're bopping each other with, PVC tools. So he was fine with the violence part. But I think not having range and the rest of it, they're just like, not my thing, which was cool. So we had to adapt. And then, we started to add guns. Then we would bring in different sci-fi, villains, if you will. We brought in Terminators for a long time and aliens. Then we added eggs, and so I would add different elements every year to the story. But at the core of it, to me, was always the player experience, right?
Right.
And that's what I felt was lacking the first time I went to a game. Is like the average. They were like, oh, there's this methodology, there's this formula you use. Right. And I don't know if it's still done that way today. I've always wanted to go to like a Viper game, which are still some of the biggest in the world to this day, and see how he runs it. Not that it really matters, and I've kind of moved on to other things. But but I wanted to make sure the players had a good experience. That was always important to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would use, and I haven't made any secret about it, I would always use the NPC team to make sure nobody got overrun and pushed in their box. Because it's a rec or a new player, or you're there with your sons and daughters, like coming out of the box and having 35 guys shoot the tar out of you, right? And we were always focused on things like overshooting and respect, and and only a couple times did I have to kick people out for those kind of things. Very rarely. Most people, you have to go talk to them, cool them off, say, hey, look, this is recreational.
Sure.
Chill out. Yeah, you're a good player. That's cool, but we're here to have fun, right? And so even in the 10 years I ran, I think I only had serious problems about 3 times because the vast majority of people respected that it was recreational and they were there for fun, you know? So we always focused on making sure that the game never became unbalanced and that there was props and clear objectives. Right, because I've seen games where they're really complex, and we did that. So I made those mistakes first 2 or 3 times. We had type storylines and plot and details. And what I realized is nobody's going to read through a plot. They're just like, oh, where do I go shoot next?
Yeah.
And so in many ways, over the years, we, I would say refined, but really we simplified it.
Sure, absolutely.
To be simple objectives, and eventually the flags, which you have now, became really
Thanks,
simple. So those of you enjoying the flags now, enjoy. So they became simple and easy to find objectives. Right, basically. So.
Nice. So that is Aliens in the Rockies, right? So we talk about the initial, what was the first game turnout like? It was all local guys, people that you ran around with. This is like, hey, I'm taking my knowledge from this and now creating mine.
So I used to run, again, this is pre social media. Okay.
Sure.
So I started collecting an email group of guys from what sources I could. It was called the Wasatch Paintball Players League, WPPL, had t-shirts, right? The old MPPL logo with the guy on it, or the old JT logo, I should say, kind of like the MPPL logo that they took later. So we actually had t-shirts, and so I started an email distribution list, and it just grew by word of mouth.
Awesome.
So I used that, and again, my small customer base, and then I had a handful of friends up in Logan, and they're the ones that helped me get the field. So it was basically a handful of guys from Davis County up there. I don't remember our initial turnout. I know I lost money on it, quite a bit of money, but I think it was 70 or 80 people in total. Yeah.
That's an awesome turnout with
it was
only
bigger
working
than
with
I
email
expected.
lists. Yeah.
It was bigger than I expected.
Was there anything prior to that in Utah organized? No.
Not that I knew of. Now, again, somebody, I'm sure Derek or somebody will send me an email and say, you're an idiot. But not that I was aware of as an average, player, right? I mean, Peg Leg was around. And I know Dale occasionally did things at his fields, but there was no sort of outdoor big public event. And certainly not of that. I mean, we were playing on 40 acres of ground, right? So to my knowledge, wasn't anything in Utah, Idaho. And over the years, I learned nothing even in Colorado. Yeah. So we started drawing people regionally by, I think, the third year.
That's really good. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, the first 3 years lost quite a bit of money.
Sure.
And I wasn't in a position. I didn't have a lot then, right?
Yeah.
It was just my little thing, and my wife was on my case, but I liked it, and I thought, okay, enough people came. If we run this efficiently, it won't lose money.
Right.
Right. And so we kind of persevered. By about year 4, it was breaking even.
Nice.
It never really made a lot of money.
Right.
But we would add prizes, and we'd add, more NPCs, and I'd always upgrade things, upgrade air trailers, and,
Player experience grew and just became better and better.
Well, and we added t-shirts.
Yep,
I mean, that was the big one, right?
Yeah.
So I love t-shirts. So I don't even have them from every year because I gave them out to people and sold them. But
that's one of the things that stick in the forums today. By the way, I know you are connected, and people will tag you and pull you into these conversations in Facebook today.
They do.
But it's like I still have my T-shirt. I still have this, and I think we
made ID cards. So I mean, we spent hours printing ID cards with the different corporations and positions.
That's awesome.
So everybody got a laminated ID card, which is common for scenarios
nowadays. But I think that level of detail on a growing format is awesome.
Yeah, and again, any games I'd been to, we didn't get it at games we went to. Would get a little uniform tag, which I thought was interesting because I'm like, I'm ex-Army, so I'm like, well, okay, but I don't have a paintball uniform, and it doesn't fit on like a competition jersey, so it never made sense to me. But it was a thing in the scenario world in those days, especially in Texas and stuff, where it was big. But I like T-shirts, and it became promotional, right? So then if you wore the T-shirt in public, you're wearing your own merch now, right? So merchandising has become pretty common.
Yeah.
But I didn't see other scenario producers doing it.
That's awesome.
And then eventually, we had a website, and then you started to see social media come around, and it was still in the early days of that, really. I mean, Facebook's relatively speaking not that old, let alone, and now it's considered an old platform, right?
Yeah.
Let alone Instagram and Reddit and everything else. So there's lots of places to market now where there wasn't. But yeah, it grew because I felt like I would listen to players. I'd solicit feedback. And sometimes that was hard. There are people that would say, hey, this sucked and I hated this. And I'd have to sort out, well, what sour grapes you're mad because you lost or some guy shot you. And what's legit? Sure. Because even in complaints, you can't just say, oh, you did a good job, Jordan. Yeah. Well, okay, but how are you going to make it better?
Right. Absolutely. And I think that was one of our pivotal roles is on the Red Creek side of things. We always put out a survey initially because we want to guide the ship towards the players. The players are always going to determine kind of what we do, how big we get, and the ability to grow. I think we always want to put our signature at the end of it, but realistically, it's all for the players out there. So that's awesome that, even then it was like, hey, this is still an open forum. Give me the good, the bad, the ugly. Yeah, so I can improve.
And what I found is you'd get a wide variety of opinions, but I was fortunate enough to have a crew of kind of core guys that helped me. Curtis is one, Kyle, Robert Kidd, Curtis Kidd, and then I eventually had teams. So, and then we had all the Eternus guys that came around. So they were always good to give feedback because they had some perspective.
Sure.
Yeah, and then I had a handful of guys that came from the beginning, for example, playing Predators. So there was guys that spent all year making a ghillie suit just to use it for these 2 days a year, right? Where else are you going to use a ghillie suit?
Yeah.
Right? And so we had to then implement touch rules and stuff, because they've been stepped on.
Yeah.
Like multiple players have been out by stepping on the Predator ghillie suit guys.
So for the people out here that didn't attend Aliens of the Rockies, myself included,
Sorry.
This man is a mad genius in how he develops some of these scenarios and how these things play out. Because like you were saying before, you would put these players, these NPCs, these force-on-force people that are determined to kind of establish that flow of the gameplay, they'd already be inserted.
Or provide a player experience.
Right.
They were strictly there to provide a player experience. Like some of them, I usually had one team, usually the Aliens or the Terminators, that they might push the field because they had hard to kill rules. But we always had other actors and players. We had Captain Merchant guys. I had one guy that he was famous as a kind of role player. He's actually unfortunately deceased. He's also Rex. He was the captain of the local Starfleet group. So a big sci-fi guy.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so he came with his sci-fi knowledge and would then interact outside the game. He came in costume, talked to people in camp, trying to recruit them for secret mercenary missions.
That's cool.
Well, yeah. Now, again, you've got to have the right personality, right?
Yeah.
But he was and did that for me for a couple years.
Yeah. The people that helped me today, and this is like not a spoiler, but the people that helped me today are not capable of being that immersed.
Well,
these are people that are like, you want a candy bar for $1 or you want, and I love those guys because we need those guys in order for us to even grow and build and do what we did.
Sure.
But the level of detail right from the beginning with that role player mindset is kind of what.
But that's my background, right? I mean, that's what I wanted and where I came from, what I missed when I went to somebody else's scenario. So I said, if I'm going to build it, I'm going to build it my way. And
that's
to your
awesome.
point, I've never had anyone else be able to do that. Like I couldn't produce it. I mean, like I said, unfortunately, this gentleman had a heart attack and he's gone. But yeah, he's a good dude. He even had me on his podcast, which was kind of cool, promoting it on his Star Trek group.
That's cool.
Which was kind of interesting.
That's
so
cool.
yeah, I knew all these sci-fi nerds that I could bring in. And the other big one I should say, and when you and I have talked about this, like Air was always run by my dad. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's now, 20 years older. He's not a young man anymore. But Air was always run by my father, for those that don't know. And he'd come once a year and do it. Didn't really pay him. Yeah. He just wanted to come spend time with the sons. And my brothers. Awesome. I have a big family. And so I usually had two, at least, sometimes three of my brothers and sister-in-laws who would come help it. So, frankly, without my wife, and I know we've talked about this, without family, you can't pay people enough to do this stuff.
Absolutely. This thing is not someone gave me an elbow at one of our games this week and was just like, you're making a killing, Jordan. I'm like, whoa. Yeah. I'm not making a killing. You should see how far everything is in the red.
I believe me. Like I said, it took us at least 4 years of pretty consistent production and investment before we went positive. Once we got up to 3 and our max was about towards the kind of height, again, a little bit post 09, about 2010, 2011, when there was still, paintball was declining, but the core players would come once a year. I mean, I had guys that for 10 years, I saw guys I only saw once a year.
That's crazy.
And I'm still friends with them,
Awesome.
On like Facebook and stuff to this day. I mean, there's guys in, like Rusty and his whole team, there's guys over in Colorado and Montana, and they only came to this event because there was nothing in our region.
Sure.
I mean, again, and there still isn't. There's, I guess, a few games in Denver, or not Denver, but a little south of Denver, I think. But they're not to that scale. So because it was the only game, we had all these awesome guys come from all over the region, and we even had people that would normally go play at D-Day. Would come play with their teammates that were from the Western or Pacific regions. I've had people fly in from out of country to play, which blew my mind. Right?
That's awesome. How far do they come from?
I don't remember. There were some Canadians that came for a couple years. There's another guy that flew in from like Hawaii or something weird, and I'm like, what are you? He's like, man, there's nothing like this in my he'd moved there for work or something. Anyway, so it became regional, and I felt a bigger responsibility, and so we always tried to get more professional refs, more professional staff, but there's not a 1-800 call a ref, as you well know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I love that.
There just isn't, right? So you'd have to find people. So early on, I had a guy named Nathaniel and Corey, and they came really from the tournament world. Okay. So they came most from and so they would help me and advise me there. And then eventually, like I said, I met the Eternus guys as that team kind of faded. Teams come and go, and they were awesome and were probably the most consistent. And you needed just labor to help set up and take down a field.
Yeah,
lots of people come help, but the tear down.
Yeah.
As you probably know.
Yeah. No, the teardown is everyone has had a long day, a long weekend, and it's like, man, we still got an hour and a half, 2 hours at best.
Or more.
Yeah. To get out of here. Yeah, exactly. I love that perspective. One thing that I wanted to dive deep into, because there's not a lot of media in terms of at the time. You know, there wasn't GoPros, there wasn't a lot of that. I did see some footage on YouTube that I kind of pulled from. And one thing I saw on that field stuff, because we pride ourselves in getting up to our field because it is ours and we are owning it. So we get to build stuff that doesn't get knocked over.
Right.
You're utilizing something for 2 days out of the year.
Yep.
How did you guys, did you just play natural bunkers that entire time?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Pretty much.
40 acres of play.
Yeah,
natural bunkers.
Yeah, well, there was woods.
Okay.
And it was an abandoned gravel pit. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it was always an adventure to roll up on the first day of planning about a month out. No, seriously, because you didn't know what had grown.
Yeah.
So I rolled up one year and it was covered in thistles, like thick, nasty, the big ones, right?
Wow.
6-7 feet high, the entire space. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, we can't play. Like, I was flipped. So that's
the original cornfield if you were to play in that.
No kidding. Well, except it was thistles. It was, you couldn't.
Don't want to dive into that.
You couldn't. So I had to talk to the owner, and he was, he charged me for the fuel, but he took his tractor and cut swaths in these thistles.
Wow.
Right, for example. And one year we rolled up and it was just grass, and it was more open than normal. So I did put a few air bunkers. And people had, so the reason this field existed is it was along a creek bed.
Okay.
And I had gone there and played games. Mm-hmm. So games had been going on there a little bit like the I-84 field used to be, or the Marriott field. Mm-hmm. So there were games going on, again, just a small scale. So in the wooded zone, there were, railroad ties and people had built kind of bunkers. But then there were these big open areas that were kind of middle of the field.
Yeah.
And one side was a lot more open than the other. But again, there were sort of berms left over from stuff. And I did pay the owner, since this was unused, to dig some berms and stuff on the open area.
That's good.
Yeah. And there was a big hill, so we always had to kind of be careful or tape it off. We unfortunately had a couple ambulance calls from people twisting their ankle on the hill. But there was enough mix of trees and terrain that, we didn't have to do anything. And it was bermed, right? So there was this natural barrier to paintballs.
Nice.
So literally there'd be a berm and people would camp 20 feet on the other side, but it was safe because there was the natural berm from from that. So it was kind of unique. That's why we kept using it. I looked at other fields. I don't know how many hours I'd spent on Google Earth.
Yeah.
I've even paid for, early days before Google Earth was a thing, I paid for small, airplane time to fly the entire Wasatch Front from Davis and Weber County.
Look at that.
This
dedication, man.
Well, this was in the old, I had somebody that had a plane. They were kind of do that for me for the fuel, but because they had to log hours. And I'm like, can you just tip the plane and fly? And I was like, it was cool. Not really efficient, but it was cool. And then eventually Google Earth came out and I'm like, oh, this is a little easier.
It's a lot easier.
So I'd look for property off and on.
Okay.
And to your point, there just wasn't any,
Yeah.
not of any size. You
Sure.
could find a half acre here, guys, 20 people gaming here.
Yeah.
I've used multiple public parks, actually. Like there's a Kaysville Wilderness area. We held a game up there, one of my first games.
That is awesome. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about how you approach the city and say, hey, everything that you possibly may have heard, you don't. Okay. You just do it. You're like, and it looks legitimate enough. We're like, oh, the kids aren't playing. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Awesome. So,
oh, yeah.
So tell me about that instance.
Well,
how many times did that happen after that happened?
We only went up to that area a couple times.
Yeah.
Because
how many people?
35 or 40. That was before Aliens. Yeah. So I was organizing games before, and there was a place right here in Kaysville. So even starting from about 97 on, I was organizing games every Saturday, like, kind of what people do now.
Yep.
So that's where I got my start. Was I got 2 CO2 tanks and my truck with a couple cases of paint in it, and it was just Saturday games, and that's where I started meeting people. Gotcha. And it was out of that group that eventually became the core of people that eventually evolved into Aliens. Gotcha. And some of them I've done business with and still friends with 30 years later.
Nice.
So
nice.
Not 30, 20, whatever it's been. 25 years later, I have to run the math. It's been a long time.
So, and then we talked a little bit about Aliens in the Rockies.
Yep.
You told me, you gave me a little tidbit that we didn't really expand on in conversation a long time prior.
Sure.
You mentioned that you were probably the only one to date to probably run a game at the fairgrounds.
Right. So I also ran Utah Extreme Paintball League, UTPL. As far as I know, so has a distinction of being the most teams. So while I was running Aliens, I was dependent on for reffing and sometimes for support from some of the teams, right? And they're like, hey, we don't have anything. And some people had tried to run stuff and it wasn't really effective. Yeah. So I actually worked and got a player database going with one of the developer guys, did PHP stuff. Nice. It's long gone now. But so we could class players because that was a huge issue. Now there's a more universal classification system.
Sure.
But back then we had to create it. Anything that was basically in the amateur zones.
Yeah.
Right. Short of, whatever the pro-am.
Look at this, drawing the structure of what's to come, like literally blazing a trail.
It wasn't just me, right? I mean, it was. I'm not saying it was all my ideas. I relied on people that had already been playing and had, gone to major events, right? And a lot of them don't even play anymore, you know, and a lot of them are older and can't play. You know, they were older than me, and I didn't get involved till I was in my 30s anyway, so I was already old for paintball by that time. But so we developed our own database and classification system and registration, and again, manual PHP. So I had a couple developers that did that, so that way we could register and class people.
Nice.
And so yes, I played games in Salt Lake County, up along I-80, just in grass, and I had portable metal stands that I designed and built with cable on them, and then I would tie them down, and we ran netting on them, and the windstorm came by one night and destroyed them, scared the tar out of me. Yeah, so I used that for several years. It was 1-inch square tubing, and if the wind came, it would bend them.
Oh.
So we'd set up, take us 2 days to set up, and if the wind came, it was destroyed.
Wow.
So that happened a couple times. But we kept trying, and then eventually I talked to the Davis County Fairgrounds, and they had an area they allowed us to put permanent poles in.
Nice.
Actually, Dan Sanders. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Dan. Hopefully you're watching.
He helped. He helped, and some of his team helped with that. All the Singleton brothers, my employees at the time, and John Perkins brought his tractor over. He's actually has a farm right over here, and he drove all the way down the fairgrounds, which is quite a ways from here, down to Farmington. Yeah, on the back roads, and brought his tractor to drill the holes. Right. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So we put in foam poles and cables, and then the netting that you have now was actually on rings, and we could put it up just like curtains.
Nice.
But the cabling was there.
Right.
It wasn't ideal. It wasn't on grass.
Sure.
But it was on kind of some wood chipped area that we would kind of dig up. But it, for several years, did a permanent home and allowed us to run as many as 24 teams in a day.
Wow. Look
so
at
we
that.
had 2 fields. Yeah. And this was, again, the refs, Nathaniel was the big one, and others that helped me run that, because that was dependent on the staff turning people quickly and air. Yeah. Right. Because when you're playing that many, and there was all 5-man games and 2 fields. So I owned 1 field. Well, I did. So it's around still if anybody wants it. So and I loaned parts of 1 from somebody else. So
gotcha.
So that we built that up over several years and ran it. The problem is that, and I love all the players, I do, but the expectations from the scenario crowd were you could meet them.
Yeah.
The expectations from the tournament and pro players were a lot higher, and they were a lot harder to meet.
What did they have comparable at the time? The national leagues,
NPPL.
So that was the standard, right?
Early NXL.
Okay, so that's the big stage. That's this. Yep. So to scale that down into a regional type field to Davis, obviously we're not going to roll out the red carpet, but we're going to get the basics done, and it's going to be good. It's going to be organized. It's going to be good. But where did that miss right there? Some of those expectations, were these just...
Well, so one of them, and I'm sure there's people that are probably mad at me to this day, but I didn't want a new team that's just practicing, trying to learn tournament ball to come and get destroyed.
Yeah.
So one of the things I said is if you were D2 classed up on NPPL database, and I used to work with Chuck Hench at NPPL, and so I've actually talked to them. I even looked at regional recognition and stuff. So I was talking to them while working locally, right? As well. We made them I didn't allow them to have more than 1 division ranked player per team.
Gotcha.
So yes, there were tournament teams, but they literally had to divide up and teach and mentor other people. That was my theory. Some of them didn't like we want to play together with their friends. I'm like, well, you do that at practice and when you go nationally.
True.
Locally, what's the point in coming and beating the tar out of a bunch of kids? Like where's the honor in that, right? But some people didn't like it, but it's a decision I made to allow the sport to grow.
There you go. And
does that make sense?
That's a common denominator, right? Is to be able to put more people in that player pool for everyone to play against.
And not have them have a terrible experience.
Exactly.
So I did make them divide up. I mean, they would still dominate and, all that business. But the other thing that I noticed is the expectation for I was giving away 100% of the money in prizes and stuff and pay out to refs to make it functional.
Nice.
So I'd get done with this huge event that all this stuff and literally made no money the whole time I ran that. I think I lost it the first couple times, but then, and we kept prices down. I didn't, jack up the paint prices to be too extreme or whatever. Sure. But even with garnering as much money as we can from paint sales and keeping the prices down and, all that kind of stuff, it didn't make money. So after, I think, 5 years of that, 4 years. So even with doing what we could to basically give out every money that came in was paid out to staff and in prizes. Like literally, I kept nothing pretty much the whole time I ran that event. And people would go, they would come, and I'm like, literally, I'm happy to show you the books.
Yeah.
I made, I mean,
here's the tip jar. Here's what I made.
Pretty much. For me, I was trying to just run the event and grow it.
Right.
Right. Because that was the model we'd had. It's called Aliens.
Yeah.
We put all the money into it. But what I found is, the expectations grew. And you and I have talked about this. Mm-hmm. In the tournament world, there's a lot more emotions.
Sure.
There's, don't be mad at me, I love you guys, but there's a lot more egos. There just is.
They know that. These people know that. They're not going to be surprised by that.
So that was not fun to deal with.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't making money. People would be mad at me invariably, and I'm like, well, this is no fun for anyone. Yeah. So I ran the event. People said, you can't do this. I said, I can. I did. And I think about the 4th or 5th year, I just said, okay, we're done. I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah. Y'all don't appreciate it.
Sure.
So I just stopped.
Yeah.
I literally walked away because nobody appreciated it.
How many people were like, hey, wait a second, don't go away? Like we did like that. We did want that.
What?
Was there
not too
was there
many.
An uproar? Okay. So they just filtered into something else, and they're like, all right, whatever. We're going to keep it moving.
I guess. Mm-hmm. I really don't know, because that was really paintball. That was probably 2008 or so. And by 2009, like, my stores weren't making money, and I had other jobs and graduated school and stuff. So by then, paintball was in a big decline. So it wasn't, I don't think there was time for reaction really much, right? It was just, paintball was in such a decline at that point, regionally, the lack of fields recreationally. I stopped doing Aliens somewhere in there, and then we picked it back up for a couple of years with some help from the Eternus guys. But
nice.
It just, paintball took such a big hit that I said, I closed all my stores, and and I had other things to do anyway.
Sure.
I had normal job that makes money.
The real full-time job that feeds this whole thing and creates the monster. So I'm curious, you go from, I love that perspective of like, hey, this is what's out there right now, and all of a sudden I can make it better. Yep. So now I'm going to dip my toes in this, and I'm going to fall face forward into it and just become immersed in this whole thing. Yep. At what point were you like, okay, let's scale this as a business and open a storefront? We've got a player base now. We've established that there are people playing, there's people coming to my events. Now I want to make a storefront.
Okay, sure. So that kind of relates to our off-camera conversation about kids, actually. Sure. So I had 2 kids at the time, and I had a regional sales job, and I was gone all the time. Mm-hmm. And what I realized, and then, when I was gone, my poor wife was doing literally, she was doing fills after her water broke one day before she gave birth one day. Okay.
Who can say that? My wife is pregnant right now. Holy smokes, man.
So yeah, her water had broke in the morning. Yeah. I was out working, and she had to do fills and deal with paintball people all day. In labor until I came home at night.
Wow. She will not let you live that one down. Holy smokes.
No, she doesn't. She's a sweetheart, but yeah.
That's awesome.
She was, she always says, yeah, you sometimes say it was my business, but I never wanted it, right? Yeah. So that was always in the background, that my wife was kind enough to help with all this stuff, but it was not her dream or vision, right? You got to provide some balance. So there was that one. The other one is she was pregnant with our 3rd kid. And I realized I was gone all the time. And so I actually quit my job and went back to school. Okay. And when I did, I had the business, I was just been out of my garage, but that's when I opened a storefront. So I would go to school, till 10 or 11 up at Weber State, and then come run the storefront all day on weekends. And so I focused, basically, I was either going to school and focusing on the retail paintball as best I could. Mm-hmm. This was in like 06 through about 08, or 05 through 08, somewhere in there. Yeah. So then I graduated from school and, got a normal job. But so I quit my good paying job because I was on the road, never saw my kids, so I could be home with the birth of my 3rd kid. Okay. So yeah, I don't mind sharing. That's, most my friends know that, but so yeah, it was during that time that I ran the tournament stuff and really did everything I could from a business perspective. Gotcha. And yeah, Aliens had grown, so we focused on making it efficient and profitable. So for those few years, it was pretty profitable, but it was my full-time job. Right.
Yeah, the time that it takes to put into that. Yeah,
it did. And my family's, right? So again, I'm drafting my wife, my kids, all my friends, and I had some ups and downs. I mean, I was near bankruptcy during that time. Some of my friends, closer friends, know that, paintball friends actually, so I don't mind sharing it in this forum. So yeah, I went through some personal, very hard times because I went from a job that I was making good money to living on student loans. Wow. And paintball. Yeah, that is not a great combo. I went in debt. Yeah. Simply put, I went in debt during those years. Yeah. Trying to make, not from the paintball side. I mean, we always were profitable, but to your point, if you have a few bucks left at the end of the month, it's not like it would pay a mortgage.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, So yeah. So that was it. So while I was doing the starving student thing, kind of a deal with 3 kids and a mortgage, that's when I really focused on growing paintball. And Aliens was one of the really bright spots because it by that time we had, again, 300 and 400 players. And at that scale, I made some money.
Right.
Not a ton,
sure.
but it was profitable because we ran it efficiently with good people who by that time, 5 or 6 years in, knew what they were doing.
And it took you, like you said, 5 or 6 years to even get to that point and arrive there. And definitely some grinding and some just knowledge of the sport, right? Knowledge of the business of the sport as well, because anyone could run out there. I think my wife would call that all the time. I think she looks at our raffle items sometimes. She's like, "You're just going to give all this away?" Like, wait a second. I'm like, hold on. I was like, we want to create this experience. We want to create that. So there's a happy balance, a happy medium.
And I had, I focused on suppliers too. So like suppliers would start to provide prizes.
Nice.
And, and negotiating deals with the vendors, like the paint vendors specifically. And I mentioned that.
Sure.
So a lot of the prizes and stuff through that time frame came from I was selling enough volume retail to go say, "Hey, buddy, you're going to give me some."
Twists arm.
I was. I was out twisting arms for Aliens, right?
That's awesome.
But they bought into it.
Sure.
And they saw that it was big. I mean, we were also we were in magazines at that time. I mean, I don't know where it is. Action Pursuit Games was a big magazine.
Awesome.
So Aliens was in the magazine. So we had that posted up and promoted it. And we were like legit. We'd been in this international magazine.
That's crazy.
I still have copies today.
I know. That's awesome. Hopefully, if it's accessible or we eventually get a picture, I'd love to put it in here for the people that see it. I know there's some appreciation with that that goes way back. I think that magazine, like the tangible, hold it, read it. I think that is that era's like prized possession to where it's like, oh, this is how we grow our hobbies. This is how we grow our sports. This is how we inform the masses.
It was at the time. Again, now that social media and things like podcasts, I mean, you've got other lower cost mediums to do it.
Sure.
But in the early days, you'd find games in magazines and bulletin boards. Again, pre-social media. That was how you had to find and promote stuff. The other big one that the customers will know is I developed a fairly large customer base. So I sent out over 4,000 color postcards every year about Aliens.
Wow.
So so that, suddenly once a year, people told me, I've saved the postcards because we would have a picture from the previous year. Yeah. Right. I mean, who gets a 4x6 postcard in the mail inviting them to a game?
That's awesome.
But that's what we did so I was leveraging the retail database, my own knowledge in kind of creating and inventing things, as well as knowledge about paintball and family and then staff and people we developed. So it was great. It was fun. Eventually I had too many family responsibilities and I would probably have kept doing it even with my business situation now if the field was easily accessible. At the end of the day, it really came down to they just said we can't have the field.
Gotcha.
And I've said this publicly still. My wife thinks I'm nuts, and I don't know. We might have a discussion. She's not here right now.
She's like PTSD. Like, don't bring that back into our life.
That's exactly what she said, actually. So she's right there. Yeah. So she's like, "Yeah, I did that. I don't know I'd do it again." And I'm like, "That's fair. Like, we were younger. We had little. It was a different situation. But if I had the right field situation, because I still have the compressors, I still have some of the stuff that would need, but." I think I have enough knowledge and understanding to pull off a game efficiently at this point.
Right.
I don't know if I'd want to be honest with you. I've got multiple businesses in and outside the country. I have other responsibilities now that eat up my time. But I've always thought, hey, if the right field situation were there once a year, I could probably, especially in more of an advisory role, if there were people that could do some of the legwork. Like I'm still open to that. But I have yet to find any field opportunity where I think it works.
Yeah. We'll have to dial someone up that has a paintball field because I don't know of anyone around here anymore that actually has a paintball field.
You got to have camping.
Camping.
You got to have access to medical for that size. You got to have hotels. I'm just telling you, you have to have catering. Like there's a whole series of things to put on a large scale event right. And that's one reason the Logan field worked is it wasn't too far from Salt Lake. But we had hotels and all the stuff in Logan to support us.
Maybe someone should inform Alan Turner of what we do up at Red Creek Paintball because there's some lodging. We do take necessary precaution for health and all the different things. We're ambulance accessible. That is a very gray line of what that would be able to do or not. But we do have some medics and people on site. Maybe we could revisit that conversation off camera. It's funny because I know some of the people that are well in tune with what Red Creek is. Or they're like, "Hey, Jordan, raise your hand and let Alan know that what we're doing out there is kind of providing that that ground of the ability to scale." That was one of the reasons why we decided not on a 10-acre plot, but on a 50-acre plot. Right? We have the capabilities to do that. Accessible by cement? No, I don't think every vehicle is going to be able to get out there. In great fashion, but we have some of the proving grounds that can scale and can go from there.
That's one reason I didn't mind, helping you with some of the stuff, and I enjoy talking to you. Is I'm glad to see, because I'm just at a point in life where I don't have that level of time and energy. I have kids that are much older. I'm in a different situation, work wise, and I have work responsibilities that would really prevent me from doing a lot. But I'm glad to see somebody out there still providing, or at least thinking about, how do I do this? Just because I did it one way doesn't mean that it's the only way by any means, right? I had a particular flavor that I wanted, and I'm very grateful that other people caught that vision and were helpful and enjoyed it. Right. At the same time, I did 2 or 3 other, types of games. We used to do them out at the Skull Valley field. I've helped with some when they used to run them up here. So I've helped with other games. None of them took off. But I do love the idea that there's still some regional, scenario game. Right. So, whatever you're doing, whether anybody's involved or not, I hope it works out. I genuinely do.
And I appreciate that. And I think that was always my perspective when I came as a player. It was like, hey, I enjoy what we do every day. I enjoy the sport. I enjoy the adrenaline for everything that you guys already know, the checklist, right? But then it's like, how do I contribute back to the community to create a place that can grow? Today in Utah, and I tried to do as much research as I could before here, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer. We have one storefront today, and that's Saints Paintball. Shout out to Matt.
I think that's the only one I'm aware of.
One retail storefront.
The other, it's not just that. The other one that I think changed the face of paintball, and again, some people can disagree with me, but some of the guys that used to play with me all moved to airsoft.
Okay, there you go.
And in fact, there was a fairly large airsoft game run by the son of the co-founder, the guy that first helped me and was a business partner.
Nice.
So so he took what he saw us doing growing up, but he didn't apply it to paintball. Right. He took it to airsoft.
And that was a mutual good thing.
No,
it was like
I gave him some equipment.
Go play. Go.
Well, not that he needed my permission by any means, but I'm just saying that but I know players that played with aliens. Right. Sometimes you mentioned tagging me, like I still know personally and follow. Several of them do airsoft.
Gotcha.
So I think that had a big, used to see paintball kids do it in the neighborhood when they weren't supposed to. That went away when airsoft showed up.
Sure.
My own kids have airsoft guns.
Yeah.
I've never picked up a paintball gun.
That's crazy.
I feel bad saying that, but we could go camping or whatever, then it was safe and cheap and easy.
That's the reality of it, right?
Well, it is.
It's the cheap factor, and not to call airsoft cheap, but while you're in the sport, it's easy to get into. Anyone can grab something.
It's also not messy and not as painful. So my young son, right? Even 3 or 4 years ago, at 6 or 7 years old, out playing airsoft. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't really take a kid paintballing until they're 12ish.
That's fair.
Just for the pain factor. People do. God bless you. But I'm just saying, I wouldn't want to scare them off because of it. So there's that also.
So interesting. You have that player base kind of shifting. Was airsoft as prevalent during that time?
Didn't exist.
So it was just barely emerging in some of these things, early tech, early stuff, and just barely hitting the market. Is that?
If you go back, I'd have to go look. I don't know the history of airsoft, but I'm just saying from a prevalency was non-existent.
Did you ever carry airsoft in your stores?
I did for a little bit. Okay. So when the paintball company started transitioning, but again, paintball was taking a nosedive. Right. The Utah economy, construction, et cetera, took a nosedive. So I never really made the transition. And I know, but I'm just saying from a player standpoint, some of the guys that used to play aliens, whether it's age or money or whatever, the ones that I know have almost personally, multiple, not just one, several of them have moved on to airsoft.
Okay.
Basically. Some of the OG paintball guys are still only paintball.
Right.
But some of the guys that were more in and out that used to play aliens were more tactical, scenario oriented. So the scenario crowd in particular, in my opinion, has from what I've seen, and I'm not as active, I grant, right? So you can disagree with me. My perception is that a lot of those have moved to airsoft. So the tactical scenario type thing, paintball was the only option, right? And it had to be played a certain way. Yeah. Well, now that's kind of like the basis of airsoft. Yeah. From what I understand.
No, exactly. And I think what's so interesting because some of the viewership and the people that we're talking to today, you're okay. And then we've got, so the MagFed community, that we have out here, it is growing. It is minuscule to
but that's new in the last, what, 2 years?
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying right here is like, man, let's give Alan Turner some first strikes and show him the mag-fed capabilities. And it's like, oh, we can just create a whole military aspect of this. And not to say, oh, forget aliens in the Rockies, but look at the capabilities now, right?
I played with the developer of First Strike at D-Day, by the way.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So he
In
knows.
the early days.
He knows what it's capable, but now like the tech has become consistent. It is something reliable. It's a platform where multiple brands.
I'm just saying from a
into
commercial standpoint. I'm just saying yes, I get that there's now paintball tech for that, but I'm saying from a cost and ease of use, like you can, like the kids, like I used to, rental wise, for example, which I still have a few, but none of even my friends have called me for rentals in I don't know how many years. Yeah. But I would get calls all the time, even when I got out, for scout groups and all that. Yeah. Well, it got completely banned within the Scouts and LDS Church stuff, which for Utah, like it or not, is a big factor.
That is a big deal, yeah.
Right? So that was one. And the other one is that Airsoft, then, for those kids that want to do it, replaced it. Mm-hmm. You know, and frankly, I think you've seen a huge, my own kids, and frankly, I do play a lot of video game stuff. Yeah. So, that's gone from, there's always been first-person shooters, but there's now so many, and VR, and there's options to get out and do it.
Right. Absolutely. No, I like that point. There is a lot to say about Airsoft and kind of how it's purged into
and no hate towards Airsoft. I'm just saying it changed the market, right? And I think that the player type and personality that Scenario Ball appealed to really shifted. I've looked at opening fields and looked at property, and we were discussing that off the air, so I don't mind bringing it up. And if I was going to do it from a commercial standpoint, I would absolutely make sure the field, if it was accessible in the Wasatch Front, had Airsoft. It was Airsoft and paintball usable.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think you've got to appeal to that wider shooting sports, recreational situation to make it work.
I think to run a successful field, you have to do that. And I think we are diversifying a little bit this next year. We're partnering with someone that's got capabilities of bringing 250, 300 out, and that would be record setting for us in terms of Red Creek. But it's like the amount of time that I spend maintaining and managing that field, it's like I know there's 300 more people that can enjoy this just as much. And who cares if it's Red Creek Airsoft for a day? I don't. Let's go ahead and spread the joy, spread the love. If I convert one or two of you, that's I'm happy.
Well, I think there's players that do both. I'm just saying from a commercial standpoint, you saw the rise of Airsoft at the same time. Paintball is more expensive, just straight up. The ammo alone, even if the markers versus the paintball, or the Airsoft markers were guns, whatever they call them. Right. Exactly. If I'm misusing the term, I apologize. Even if you compare those, because there are some super expensive high-tech, semi-auto AEG guns, right? Versus even the lower cost mag-feds, and I know there's a lot of low-cost electro-pneumatics now, which, again, was not a thing.
Right. Exactly. No, Airsoft has actually come out in the last couple of years, and they're utilizing some HPA and HPA now.
I saw that.
So now you actually have some paintball brands now making and just moving their platform,
tanks, etc.
Yeah.
So I think there's room for it. But I think if you're going to do it from if I was going to do it from a commercial standpoint, it would need to be inclusive. And I've looked at that when we ran the velocity field up here. When we built that out, which is a bad memory for those of you that may watch this, I'm sorry, that crashed and burned because of the people running it. But several of us, myself being a big one, were supporters and tried to help, have a local field. Yeah. In fact, I even helped argue to the county and then to the state. So the area that existed in was designated as green space, open space, so it reduced the tax burden and all that. We helped put power out and all that. And then it crashed and burned. Now it's just a Ren Fair. So, I love those people too. Love y'all. Yeah. But, it was a paintball field. Now it's all the stuff we built for paintball crashed and burned, but they're using it for Renaissance Fair stuff now.
Gotcha.
FYI.
So was Brody Dixon involved in that?
No.
Not in that one? He has a similar story that we'll eventually visit on a later
He may
podcast.
have been after I was involved.
Okay.
Yeah. Things went badly with the people that were running it.
Gotcha.
And anyway, yeah.
Well, I think I know we covered a lot, and we could probably do 2 or 3 more sessions in regards to everything that we've got going on. Here, I'll sync the audio later on that. We switched cameras real quick because we are full up on the GoPro, so don't mind the quality change here. Hopefully it stays pretty consistent in post. But we wanted to dive in even further with Alan Turner because I think we're getting to some gold nuggets of what used to be the history, or still is the history of Utah Paintball, and I think that's what's so exciting. I think one thing I wanted you to build off of is your perspective. I've seen some people come from the tournament scene that say, hey, I want to do this, I want to do that. And, credit to Dan Sanders, who's ran some Battlefield Utah, who was, driven off of, let's give a big game scenario to Utah, but let's not do much more than that. No disrespect, Dan.
The first Battlefield Utah was my idea and plan.
Oh, uh-oh. Dan.
Dan, yep.
Dan, did you lie to me? I'm just kidding. No, me and Dan have had great conversations. We're good friends. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so Desert Edge did roughing for me at Aliens, and then we wanted to run something out here. And so, the original name and where it came from was stuff that we developed, and I was the original sponsor for Desert Edge. And somewhere along the way, I don't remember things. Dan and I got a little sideways over something. I like the guy, but we had some disagreements. And then he kind of took the idea and ran it, and suddenly it was his. And I'm like, wait a minute, this was coming from all the marketing I'd done for Aliens, the reputation we had, and drawing the players and stuff. And I think he's gone on and done other stuff with it, and so God bless him. But I was always looking for other venues and places. Mm-hmm. I'd been out to multiple places in the West Desert, looking at stuff, and for a while Desert Edge ran their field. Up past Eagle Mountain where Dan lived. So there was that whole deal. So from my perspective, that came along kind of midway towards the end of my paintball time. But to some people, I know that's looked at as, that's old school. Well, there was a whole lot going on. Paintball was bigger before that. Like I said, that kind of most of that came on in what I, from my perception, and the market generally perceives as a real kind of lull as you went into the 2010s.
Gotcha.
Basically.
Gotcha. And that's so interesting because here we are 2020 talking about stuff that was 06 and 08, 09, and realistically that is pretty old in terms of the amount of span that we had, you know what I mean?
I suppose.
I think there's just so much time in between, and where was everything else? Because I think as we take the tour of Utah and we fill in those blanks, I think we're going to find a lot of this is the glory period of paintball. I know that you had Tim Kennedy. Hey Tim, I don't even know if he's still around, but he was running stuff. So one of the reasons Aliens was successful is we connected with regional groups. So there was guys in Cedar City or guys over in Nevada that were isolated. So you had all these small isolated groups. But we started doing enough marketing that people started coming. Man, what does that sound like? Is Caden Hanks joining us on the podcast? I know you might not know that name. He actually attended Aliens of the Rockies. You know Caden.
Oh, yeah, I know
He
Caden.
speaks highly of Aliens of the Rockies in that series and probably everything scenario paintball. But what he's done, and he's all the way out in Ephraim. He's got 5 or 6 guys that have stuff and that can even go play in the backyard. And what he's done is says, Utah Woods Ball, let's bring everyone together. Let's piece everyone right back together and find that home.
And there were some guys in Ogden when I started that were kind of doing that, the 84 field, right? Mm-hmm. So I think they kind of looked at I was suddenly infringing on their turf by selling and sending people up there. And I was doing stuff in Davis County, right? And that's just Weber, Davis County, Salt Lake.
I'm going to double check something real quick. I just want to make sure we're good. You're good.
So, I think that I would assume or project that exists today. You've got small groups that are doing things all over. I mean, I have cousins that were doing paintball, somewhat unbeknownst to me. I have a big family all over the state and Southeast Idaho for that matter. I have lots of siblings and cousins. So I have some cousins that never came to anything I did, but they run little games out in the Vernal area.
Satellites, example. Right? Little areas, little.
And so I think there are leaders or people that organize groups. I mean, there was a field in St. George. I never went to it. I can't remember. I apologize. I can't remember the guy that ran it, but he had been to Aliens and was somebody that I worked with, on sort of ideas and design. But they had it was on city property.
Okay.
In St. George for a while. I don't know if it still exists. Probably not. But so you could schedule a time, and it was a public park.
Wow.
But it was paintball.
Wow.
And I don't know if it was very developed. I never went down and played it. But there were games and events like that were going on. I think all over. There's some guys in Vegas that came out. I actually went down to a Vegas game. Met one of my MMA fans, Randy Couture, actually. It was a charity event.
He's in the paintball world.
Yes, he is.
He likes the paintball.
He is. So met
That's
him
awesome.
and some MMA guys at a charity event down in Vegas. So
cool.
Because one of the Vegas teams, again, they didn't have anything, so they were coming all the way up here to Utah.
That's awesome.
So I think I would project that you've probably got people, whether it's paintball or even airsoft or whatever, doing stuff in a lot of these smaller communities.
Right.
But whether it's fields or logistics, there isn't a good way or purpose to bring everybody together unless it's a viable, scenario or big game setting, and there isn't a place to do it.
Yeah. Agreed. And we're still doing a form of that in outlaw ball. We actually go to Moapa, which is a great middle point, and it's a really cool venue, very unsafe. You know what I mean? It's not something that insurance is going to jump in and say
I saw that on Facebook. I was like, ooh.
Wow, yeah. There's some
insurance
liabilities.
Is a whole pain in the butt, as you probably well know.
You brought up one thing in that segment right there that I kind of want to. My passion and dream is paintball, but I'd love for it to see. I don't think you'd ever see a pickup basketball game happen like a paintball game, sure. But I think at least one county, one city within Utah should be capable of having, hey, this is designated land. If an action sports wants to kind of take over that, we invest this money into BMX, into skateboarding, and all these other sports that could be say, oh, that's kind of dangerous. That's this. How do we get to that point? Do you think we'd ever see something like that in our era and going forward?
Well, I would never say never, right?
Sure.
But it would require someone with political power who could exert influence, or a really friendly county official.
Yeah.
I think so. Again, I was able to do that. I was able to do that at Davis County.
Yeah.
At the fairgrounds,
that's
which
awesome.
is now, by the way, the SCCA racetrack area.
Okay.
So they've continued that tradition of having a public place be that way. I think if you went to some of the rural counties, for example, I do other sports now, so I took a long-range shooting course, right? So we're shooting 1,000 yards and practicing with nice rifles and all this sort of stuff. Real guns, okay?
Real still, yeah.
Yeah, real deal. So where we practiced was out in Ephraim area,
okay.
And it's actually a county course, but it's really nice over thousands of acres.
That's awesome.
So the model exists
both
in the state and other places. You'd have to find a place, target it, work with the politicians. I mean, it's doable.
Yeah.
But there, in my mind, for me, like you'd have to have enough of a viable community to use it.
I saw a comment in PB Nation, which is you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
I saw a comment. Someone said, I live in Utah. This was a while ago. I live in Utah. I don't have anywhere to play. And massive amount of comments. Wait a second. You live in one of the best recreational states in the entire U.S. And you're telling me you're struggling with a place to play.
It's true.
And it is kind of crazy that is the case, right? We've had these great runs by these established fields, whether it be a huge amount of them or the capability to play. But why can't we run up into one of these canyons? One of my dreams, and I'm going to lead into this. Sure. One of my dreams is, hey, what are those ski resorts doing in the summer times? Right? They're running the roller coasters. They're doing this. They're doing those attractions.
I've tried to talk to some of them.
How cool would that be, right? We're known for our snow.
They didn't want damage of the environment.
That's crazy.
I'm not saying it's not doable. I'm just saying, I've explored that avenue. I don't think there's anybody but one person that knows what I'll explain, and I'll try to keep it simple because it's complicated. But over the course of 2 years, I went to BLM and tried to get a permanent use permit for a paintball field out at what I call the Skull Valley field area. I don't know if anybody still plays there. So
where's that located? Because I've never played there.
Yeah. So, there was a guy at one time that would run one small size game there, and I had been to it. He unfortunately passed away like the day after the games he ran.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. But so if you go out past Tooele and Grantsville.
Yep.
Okay, and you then take the road that has all the radiation label warning signs on it, out towards Dugway and all that. It's down that road.
Gotcha.
Basically, but it's been closed down for years because of off-road vehicle use.
Okay.
In fact, last time I was out there was huge fencing all around it. So I don't think it's even accessible.
Still BLM land?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the BLM's a perfect example. What I ran into is the BLM supervisor. I had someone at the mid-level when I was doing all these application permits that include environmental impact studies. So I did 2 environmental impact studies.
Yeah.
Luckily, good friend of mine was in that business, so he wrote up reports.
Nice.
He's a environmental scientist, so he wrote up a report. What I ran into is the BLM regional supervisor did not like paintball, period. Gotcha. And so they told me, they said, don't bother. As soon as it goes to his desk, he will deny it. And I went ahead and submitted it twice. Of course, got denied twice.
Wow.
So
Any meetings, right? Any face-to-face meetings with that?
It's just a permit, and they have like an 8-month approval process.
Wow.
Or something stupid. I now know somebody because of just relationships within that BLM community and some civil engineers. So, to your point, there's designated rocket fields, for example,
there you go,
out in the West Desert. So there is precedence for it, but they're very averse. And Forest Service. I talked to Forest Service Regional.
Okay.
And there was a Forest Service ranger. She was super awesome, super helpful. She actually helped me pull off a game when I got denied property one year.
That's cool.
She was very awesome. Yeah, we just took over a camp.
Shout out to her for clutch.
Well, yeah.
What a great move.
But same thing. You couldn't get permanent use within the Forest Service. But again, unfortunately, I think you'd need political connections.
Sure. But
yeah, I mean, what percent of Utah? 60-something% is federally owned.
Yeah.
And most of that's BLM land all over the state.
Yeah.
You would think, in my mind, I've always believed there ought to be, just like there's off-road use, there's wilderness use. Why can't we go have somewhere that's kind of unused otherwise, a place where that exists on public land?
And what's crazy is we're in a position right now where we're asking for one place to play, right? How many places can you ride your off-road vehicle? How many hiking trails? Where are you going for your recreation? And it's like, here we are. And someone said that we had a police officer show up at Hobble Creek, Utah, or Springville, Utah, in Hobble Creek, and he's just like, someone called you guys in because they couldn't access the hiking trail, and they were saying you guys were being rambunctious and stuff like that. And he's just no, we're good. We always play here. And he's like, yeah, this is exactly where you guys should be playing. Oh,
that's cool.
And he was a great perspective of this is where this is done. Right.
You're lucky he was reasonable.
Sure. Absolutely. If you guys were there, there was a lot of people there that day, and it's just like, man, it might look intimidating from someone who's looking to access the hiking trail.
I think that's it. I think the general public looks at it as weird and extreme.
Yeah.
And you've got more, I don't want to get political, but unfortunately you've got more aversion, to guns and shooting sports in general 20 years later than when I started, so that's unfortunately just part of the culture that I think you face. So if you want my opinion, that's prejudicial. So I would straight up call that prejudice because they don't understand the sport.
Right.
So in my mind, whether it's Forest Service or BLM, something like that, especially BLM, it would seem to me there ought to be a way.
Right.
So I tried both getting permanent use. I tried getting event certificates. So if you do certain river rafting things in the state, you have to get a usage permit from BLM.
Okay.
So I was trying to get the equivalent of a usage permit. You can do a filming permit. If you want to talk off screen, because it's boring, I can't.
No, you're kidding.
But there's money involved.
Yeah.
So you have to estimate your income, and they have to take X% of it. So I looked at it and went, well, it kind of makes running a paintball game that's, as we already talked about, not particularly profitable to begin with, nearly impossible to pay them a $1,000 retainer fee and 5% a gate and all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't, So I tried that for really about 4 years, but 2 years pretty solidly, trying to find an alternative to the field for a different. Because I had all these ideas for other games, and obviously we had a lot of desert, right? And that's and it's because it's something you could do later in the year. Yeah. So it would make sense to me to have somewhere at a lower elevation that you could go to either in the winter or I always thought the 2 games a year, earlier in the year, later in the year.
Yeah.
So I've always looked for better elevation properties. Anyway, in theory, you'd think it would make sense there ought to be a place where can we just have a handful of acres?
Sure.
You do have a model like that. So I also do some racing. For those of you that know me very well. And so I've done quite a bit out of what was Utah Motorsports Campus, which is owned by Tooele County. So there's thousands of acres there.
Right.
So I think in some of the more rural counties, I think there is precedence. But organizing enough of us to become a political voting force, and put pressure.
We're not swaying much votes.
I'm just saying, a lot of these kids don't even vote that play. You know what I mean?
They're going through their calendar, and it's just like, who are we meeting with, Jenny, for 15 minutes? The Paintball Coalition of Utah.
Exactly.
We get laughed out of a lot of meetings, I feel like. But
that is how you. But as funny as that might sound, that is exactly the way you'd have to go. I think what I've learned now from doing some property development and other things in my real life, I think that is exactly the kind of thing you'd have to do. You'd have to make, and again, I don't, for me that's administrative. It's not a big deal, but we could form a 501c. You could do a bunch of things, and that's something I could help with corporate structure wise to legitimize some sort of public interest, charity, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, I think you'd have to go through some steps to legitimize it and have enough. I mean, politicians at the end of the day are about votes.
Yeah.
I have pictures from, there's an abandoned Department of Energy site that was actually radiation or a uranium processor that I went down and looked at. And it would have been cool for games. Oh, it was gorgeous. I'd have to go find the pictures. I haven't looked at them in years. But it was far enough away, it was problematic. So I've lost track of the number of places I've been and walked trying to negotiate out places to play paintball.
Sure.
That never came to fruition.
Right.
And again, so many years of that. Again, I did that for almost 15 years off and on, and I finally just gave up.
Yeah.
When the Logan field got shut down. But yes, somewhere out there
Yeah.
ought to be
a
public place or a couple in some counties where we could set it up and use it, and it was available as a public park.
Right.
I mean, there's skate parks.
Yes, exactly.
There's public parks for soccer that we maintain and I pay taxes for and my kids use, so I'm grateful. But it always seemed to me that there ought to be a way, because we can play paintball on pretty trashy land.
Yeah.
It does not have to be nice, pretty property. It can be, I used to practice under some power lines, with the Singleton brothers. So, so there's all kinds of places like that I think there ought to be a way to do that.
Yeah. Maybe it just takes some ambition, right? It takes the ability to
take organization and consistency over time
to get together. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause that's not something that you can do over the course of a few months. You'd be talking a multi-year project for something like that.
But something that leaves a legacy, right? And the ability to do so and then plant the seeds for the future and be able to grow that avenue.
And I've tried to look and buy cheap property
here
in Davis County. In fact, I was trying to buy some property down here just west of where we're at for a number of years. It can't be developed, but now it's going into the highway.
Oh, okay.
So the state came through and bought it all. But the other thing is you could lease property from Utah Power.
Okay.
Or the railroad. They have big swaths of stuff. So under the power lines, power company owns.
Yeah.
For example. So I think there are some creative alternatives. But yeah, it would take a number of us in an organized fashion.
Sure.
With political will, if you will, and consistency to work over multiple years to get something done politically. And I know, nobody likes politics. I get it.
It gets messy. It will get messy.
But that I think something like that is theoretically possible.
Yeah.
And I don't know if other people have tried. I have. That's why I know a little bit about it. I've tried and done and been somewhat successful. We did get the one paintball field designated as green space for tax reasons, like I said. So, I have done some of that throughout the years, but I don't know. There's got to be rural property out there somewhere, people.
Yeah, talk to your farmers. Talk to your uncle and your grandpa.
or somebody on the county planning board.
Yeah, true.
Or the city planning board, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be property that can't be used for things, for floodplain, whatever, right? Something that could be leased or designated for public use.
Right. So I live in Harriman, Utah.
Right.
It was quite the drive to get out here to Layton. It always seems further than what it is. But I'm in Harriman, and I'm not all the way up against the mountain yet. But Rio Tinto has a huge foothold in that whole Bacchus Highway area and development.
The canyons right there is where people used to play in the early days.
There you go. Yeah, right
I
there.
I didn't even know all. That's before
Butterfield Canyon. Yeah.
Yes, Butterfield. There's another one, Yellow something.
I'm not too familiar with it. Not an avid hiker. Sorry.
Butterfield was one of them.
Yeah, and I drive that canyon. I've gone to Tooele in that direction to catch some games and stuff like that out in Tooele, and I drive through there, and I'm as a paintballer, we all do this. We're salivating at the chance to be like, man, this would be great. This would be cool.
Yes.
This is naturally ready to go tomorrow. Like, we don't need to carry anything out. Show up with air and let's play.
There's an abandoned military base in Tooele that I tried to get to.
Yes, I
make
sales calls out there at that.
So
place.
I have walked that. I even tried a little bit to talk to them. So but again, they don't want to talk to you. It's military surplus. Nobody wants to deal with it.
Yeah. So how do you flip those guys? Because you have
man, I don't know.
You have
I had very limited success.
Yeah. I'm right next to it. What's that military base that's right towards Point in the Mountain on the other side?
Camp Williams.
Camp Williams. Wow.
Yeah,
I'm sorry that I drew a blank.
I've shot many 203 grenades there.
There you go.
Been out there.
So Camp Williams.
It's dry and nasty. Spent nights out there too.
What is this, Alan? We're going off grid or what? What are we talking about?
No.
You spent nights out there.
I was Army.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Shout out Fred. He's out at Camp Williams too. He's a buddy on my team.
Okay, cool.
With Camp Williams. So they have a joint airsoft game. So they have some not proving grounds, but they have some training grounds out there that they're running their own drills and all that stuff on. Airsoft has reached out and made that connection, and Airsoft is hosting a regular 1-year event game where USA Army comes out, and they might try to recruit and do the whole thing. But it is a
we talked to recruiters and had kind of a small event out there.
Yeah.
So actually, Dan and I.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think.
But it never really went anywhere after that.
Right.
Because I think Airsoft, to your point, Airsoft leads more to the tactical military stuff than paintball, which is more recreate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the recruiters kind of gravitated, but it's because we knew some recruiters and worked on it.
Nice.
But access to that's always going to be a problem. So I really don't. I can't see a military base making any sense.
Yeah.
Now again, abandoned property. Maybe, but the permissions for that, again, get into the political realm and get complex.
Well, my MagFed idea, and this is MagFed, this is the genre and how it's built. I've always looked at it and I said, okay, if we're able to grow this enough to where we can get some military out, I'm sure those guys are already interested in playing paintball and airsoft, but what if we quote unquote sanction a game and say, hey, this is military versus civilians or whatever, it doesn't have to be a whole scenario, but if you're able to line up against someone and do those type of trainings and do those that type of game, I'm talking player experience here, to be able to do that wherever you do it at. We'll do it out at Red Creek, sure, but hey, why don't we place a call and do it at Camp Williams and do it here that you guys already have stuff established?
Access is a problem on Williams or any military base, well, especially nowadays. That's all shut
and
down.
Then it full circle all the way back. Hey, if BLM already has it set up, we can just party there.
Well, that's it. So I really think, one of the things about something like a BLM or even Forest Service is they will enter into 100-year leases.
Yeah.
Right? And licensing and stuff like that. So again, in my mind, those kind of options on federal land where you can make an argument, get it approved through the hierarchy, but you've got to have people in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Basically, you got to politic them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like it or not, you can call it what you want, but you'd have to have somebody friendly in the hierarchy of the regional BLM office or the regional Forest Service office.
And you mentioned one thing that didn't come to my mind at all. This is your knowledge and you coming to fruition here. You have rocket enthusiasts have a little portion.
They do.
Obviously, you have.
Well, and right down the street from us, the Department of Highway Transportation. So I was looking at buying a little piece of land and putting paintball on it because then it was cheap, right? And literally it was a pig farm, is what it was. And there's skeeters, and I was trying to figure out how do I maintain the skeeters because it's right out on the swamp. So it's out on the west side, right? Nasty piece of property, but I thought I could buy it,
Right.
Now it's all going to be Legacy Highway going north from Farmington, but they allowed the RC aircraft that had a place that they'd been leasing to stay.
Okay.
So that's the State Department of Highway Transportation.
So
I'm saying there is precedence and reasons, but I think people can wrap their head around, we're a group of guys and we fly our airplanes, like they get that. But suddenly, we're guys with guns. Oh, no.
But there is guys with guns going to them, right? Like what is, you know better than I do on the real still pieces. Like you have places that you play that are maintained by the state and stuff like that, or maintained by a club, and you form a club and you're able to do that.
Oh, shooting on gun range?
Exactly.
Well, sure. Every county has gun ranges.
Right. So I feel like we're not so different. We need to have the right conversation with the right people.
That's what I'm telling you.
Now we have our play place.
I think it's possible.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at the shooting sports, gun range stuff, almost every county, because of the history of hunting and other stuff, has it. And so, maybe you approach it from people that are friendly to that.
Right.
Maybe. But I think also the hunters tend to be older guys and, young kid playing paintball over here, right? Just to get off my lawn stuff. I don't know. I never felt a lot of support and love from the hunting sports guys.
Yeah.
Either, right?
And so all of the people that play MagFed today, given it's not really big in this area, and I know MagFed is a little bit on the latter side of what's come out recently.
Yeah.
But we're holding these MagFed guns, and everyone at home, if you've held a MagFed gun, you're like, oh, this is 1-to-1 to what I do over here.
Right.
Sure, we don't shoot as far. Sure, we don't do that. And I tell all my buddies that love their real still guns and do all that. I'm just like, hey, I get you go shoot targets. I get that you go run around and do these drills and you ping and you train and you do this and you compete. I get that you do that. But guess what we do? We go shoot people every weekend. That's something that you can't do legally with that piece of firearm. True. And it's just like, sure, there's an expense to it into getting into it, but I think those people that are playing real still, I think that they have the budget, they have the ability to get out there and maybe make that transition and say, hey, let's apply something.
But the real gun enthusiasts, so again, I associate and know some. I have a lot of firearms myself. I don't think a lot of those guys, would necessarily want to come and play paintball necessarily.
Sure.
So I don't know that that's necessarily in my mind.
Not even first strikes. Hold on. How much do we have on?
No, I'm just saying I think they look at it different. Like you said, they're out, they're reloading, they're hunters. Like the idea of shooting people for fun.
Sure.
I know enough of them.
Yeah.
I don't think it would appeal to a lot of them.
Gotcha.
A small section maybe, you know, but again, those guys already gravitated to airsoft.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, the ones that are some crossover. I mean, most paintball enthusiasts I know own guns.
Yeah.
In Utah.
Yeah.
Again, gun ownership here is near the highest in the per capita is near the highest in the country, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, probably say the same thing in Texas, I would suspect, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know that people that are all into that would do it, but the precedence that there is gun ranges in almost any county,
sure,
usually supported by either the city or the county, maintained by private organizations, is a model that is viable that we could look to.
That's interesting. There you go. Take that and run with it. Are we?
Somebody go.
We're on the third hour here coming up, and we're diving deep into the politics of what could be a possible outcome. You know what I mean? But no, I think Alan, as we wrap this up, you've been an awesome guest, and I hope we could probably revisit. I think this is going to spur a lot of questions that kind of come from this and this meeting, because I love diving in with what was it before, because I think I'm a big advocate of, give me the history so we can kind of lay out the future as well.
Sure.
And in respect to that, let's not make the same mistakes twice. Let's also build on the community in there. I think as we kind of leave this conversation, what do you think? I mean, what do you want people at home, future Utah? This sounds kind of like a promotion or something here. But tell me,
what my old man beard? Huh?
Tell me what do you see coming? What do you see? What do you want people to take this conversation and have and say, okay, Alan Turner contributed this to the Utah paintball community. I know you're not necessarily looking for an award, but I'm just saying, what is that? What is?
My 2 cents is this: that if you have a bit of a brain and you can think a little bit. Mm-hmm. Then you can do more or less everything I did. Nothing I did was magical. Mm-hmm. It's all recreatable,
Gotcha.
It takes a lot of work and dedication, and I think that's where a lot of people aren't willing to put it in.
Yeah.
Oh, I want this, but they're not willing to go out and put multiple years of effort and money on the line. And talk is one thing. We've discussed this a little bit previously when we met. Like, a lot of people say they want to do things, but actually doing it,
sure,
that's the hard part. Like, ideas are easy. Executing them consistently over time with money and effort, is harder, but it's doable.
Yeah.
So if you're in your area and you want to do something, go do it. I'm happy to give my 2 cents, mm-hmm. but the market is different. Your individual situation's different.
Sure.
But it is doable. I'm nothing special. I didn't play tournament ball. I had no advantages. I just decided, here's what I'm going to try and do. Yeah. And I worked at it. And it took time. Yeah. But it's certainly possible. So that's why I was glad to see what you're doing at Red Creek. I mean, I've not been out there. Sure. I haven't even actively played now. I used to go to Super Game, but I haven't even actively played now in several years. The guys I used to go with don't go anymore. Yeah. And I'm getting older. I mean, it's that's not. I don't run around the way I used to. That's an unfortunate reality too, as age catches up with you for sports like this, right?
Sure.
But if you're out there and want to try and do something. Support what Jordan's doing. And I'm not trying to plug necessarily because we came to meet.
That's a free ad, guys.
Well, but I'm just
no,
saying.
I know what you're saying.
Go support somebody who's trying to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one reason that when you reached out, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll help you with what I can, mm-hmm. whether it's information or equipment or whatever, because I'd rather see it used. Yeah. So if you're in some small county in the state or in another state, I mean, we were similar in Wyoming, and I got family all over Idaho. If you can find a place to do it and promote it, and that's what you want to do, look, try it.
There you go.
I mean, what's the worst case that happens? You're 6 months or a year older, and maybe you didn't have as many people as you wanted, or it didn't go great.
Yeah.
It's an experience too. So
right.
I just hope people would, take away that you can develop things that are big and that do impact people's lives, but it takes time.
Sure.
It takes conscientiousness. it takes some planning, but it's entirely possible for anybody.
I like that. I like that as a lasting message. I think if I was to hear that from you in the beginning of this without my personal motives, I'd be like, man, I'm so empowered. I'm ready to do that. I think there is a lot of people too, and I hear it kind of in the fringe of the communities that have purchased land that are looking to develop something and try to grow something. I think we're going to see a lot next year.
If you think you're going to make money, just stop.
Everyone says that.
Yeah,
Everyone says that, and it is true. It is really true. And I like your perspective here of drawing that in and saying, hey, it was 3 or 4 years before we really caught something. Yeah, broke even. And then you break even 2 or 3 more years. Like, oh, thank gosh, the taxes are going to be okay. This is going to be okay. And then you make a little bit of money. Yeah, but nothing to pay a mortgage.
No, not at all.
He was very clear about that, guys. So be careful. Don't dive full in.
No.
Don't quit your day job. No, I think that's really cool.
There's vastly many more commercial failures in paintball. You don't have to look very far, whether it's Tippmann, which was huge, right? Or, any number of people that I used to deal with that were icons of paintball that have disappeared in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
You don't have to look. You don't have to look very far.
Yeah,
consolidations, right? So it's not just on the corporate level or some mysterious corporate people. Like, there are salespeople I knew who were unemployed when that happened. Now, granted, I've been out of it a while, but I was still connected with them on social media or email or whatever. And they were unemployed when those companies went under.
Yeah.
Again, that's going back a few years. But so nobody's going to get rich doing a hobby like this.
Yeah.
They're just not. There's not enough money and volume in it, to do it. But if you can, break even, maybe, hopefully, and pay your people. I think that's pretty optimistic. But if you want to try it, do it. There are lots of ways to accomplish anything we want for scenarios. There's so many ways. Bring in your favorite stories. I don't care if it's Marvel or Star Wars or whatever.
That's awesome. Yeah, and put your personal touch, your flavor on it, your spin. I think that's something that I take away from this. As much as I quote unquote streamlined some things and got very specific on gameplay and player experience, I missed the whole storyline ability and the takeaways from this. And I think that's something where we can improve on it in terms of Red Creek. But I love hearing that perspective and kind of growing that because there's a lot of that out there.
Enjoy your creativity. I mean, at the core, people want to come out and shoot people, right?
Yeah.
So you don't lose sight of that, right? You don't have story narrative.
Don't take the gun away, right? Don't say, hey.
I told you I've had people that didn't have guns, right? I actually gave them the little back in the day, gave them the little 6-shot CO2 pistols.
Yeah,
and that's what the guy carried around.
That's cool.
So that's entirely possible. But no, if you've got some idea you want to play out and you can live out that fantasy experience, again, whatever it is, whether it's the Wild West or sci-fi or whatever, and you can do it, give it a shot, invite your friends, do something creative and interesting. What's the worst thing you're going to do? It's going to flop? Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah.
You still had experience.
There's way more credit in trying, especially with the ability. I always approach our community, and I think it's fragile. I think if you don't have people, and I'm going to plug myself here, but also Caden Hanks, and you have some people right now that are leading charges to just bring people together, right?
Good.
I before we leave, and we say this, I got frustrated last year. One of our games didn't have a great attendance, and I wasn't outspoken about this, but I think I mentioned on the podcast, and I'm like, am I more upset that I only had 50 players through our doors when I thought we'd have 100, or am I more upset that only 100 of those players were were available to begin with? The player pool was only 100 players, right? And I think there is more out there, and I think we need to do a better job of breeding those people and bringing them together, and just also creating, if not at my field, but also at other fields, to where we are able to just unite and come together for quote unquote a bigger purpose. Maybe that sounds real big, but
no, I think it's good.
Let's grow.
Even charity games,
Sure.
That gives people an extra reason to come or something like that. So I wouldn't be afraid of trying that. I know that's it's not going to be a fundraiser and make money. So that's the bad idea. Just don't do that. But even if you're trying to do something, some other element of it, or hey, so-and-so's, I don't know, leaving out of the country, join the military, or going on a mission.
Yeah.
If there's some other reason
Sure.
to host a celebration, and part of that can be paintball, or so-and-so had a kid, or getting married. I don't know.
Yeah. Tidbits, a bunch of tidbits.
Yeah, I'm just saying you could do that stuff.
Yeah.
I had a couple of prom groups come and rent from me.
Yeah.
And the girls were game, but they're like, yeah, I had bruises for prom.
Yeah, true. That's very true.
So I just thought it was funny. They're like, yeah, we're not doing that again.
Yeah. I wonder how many people, don't revisit that, because that's a big runner. Prom groups and stuff like that. We'll talk to people. Yeah. We'll talk to people later on the podcast.
Without a place to go.
Yeah.
That's convenient. I really think the access to a convenient field. So I appreciate what you're doing, but it's not a 15-minute drive.
No, it isn't.
We used to have multiple places. We used to have multiple places from where we are right here in Davis County when I started within a 15 or 20-minute drive.
Right.
And the fact that doesn't exist, I think, is what's had the biggest impact.
Sure.
That's my personal opinion.
I completely agree. And I always keep my eye out for the right piece of property, and I would actually probably trade a lot of my coins out there to bring it closer to home, because hey, 2 hours out there, 2 hours back just to maintain the field. Let me tell you, there's been some long days on the road. That's 4 hours travel time for what, 2 hours worth of work.
I can understand that.
So as we wrap up here, Alan, of course, I appreciate your time, your insight, your knowledge, the passion that is paintball and still lives in you. I could see that, people. I could see that this man is always looking out. Hey, that would be a great paintball spot.
I mean, I did for a lot of years. Those habits, die out. I moved on to other sports, and I've, grown kids now that require my attention. But so, my life's just a little different. Right. I'm not in a position to do that. But yeah, I still kind of keep tabs on the paintball community a little bit. So.
I hope we see some form of aliens in the Rockies hopefully makes a home at Red Creek. I'm not going to put any promises out there, but I think I'm going to prove to Alan, I'm like, hey, I think we got a couple of the pieces of the puzzle where we might be able to, you can maintain your full-time job and you can keep your responsibilities, and I want you to show up and be a part of something. And I'd love for you to see what we have going on out there, but to make an ovation to what was before us and maybe build off of what can come. I think that would be really awesome, and I think all the people in the paintball community would jump up for that.
Well, I wish you good luck with the field. I wish you good luck with events.
Look at this. Oh, COVID.
COVID. Sorry, man. Or whatever else. No, I really do. I sincerely wish you, and frankly, Caden, anybody else who's out there trying to build a community, I think that's great. I mean, some of those relationships will last a lifetime. You may not see it now, but again, some of those, one of my particular relationships that I had running rec games turned into a long-term friend and business relationship, for many years.
That's awesome.
So, so you never know where that stuff goes.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Alan. We appreciate you joining. We're going to go ahead and wrap right now, so we'll catch you on episode 3. Thanks. Go ahead and share the podcast. I almost missed my plug. Make sure you share the podcast. Move this around.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe. That's the millennial term, right?
Oh, okay.
And of course we do that. But I think what's really cool about this, right, is I've seen you mentioned in these forums from time and time and time again, and I'm like, man, I told you early on, I was like, I want to connect you. I want to be able to learn from what you've done, and I think this is the ability to do that. So share this with someone who needs some inspiration. Share this with someone who wants to hear a little bit of the history of paintball, and I think people are going to really find this is intriguing. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Take care.